May 1718. Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. Every ship trying to enter this port is being stopped, boarded, and stripped. Every ship trying to leave is turned back at gunpoint. One pirate vessel has just sealed an entire American city off from the ocean. And you already know this ship. Hollywood made her famous under another name, the Black Pearl. But the real one didn't need a curse to terrify a coastline, 40 guns, a hull dark with tar, and a captain who understood that fear travels faster than cannon fire. This isn't a movie scene. It's sitting in the colonial records of South Carolina, sworn statements, hostage lists, ransom demands, written down by the people who lived through it. For 1 week, the richest city in the southern colonies belonged to a single ship, and what her captain demanded to let Charleston live made no sense at all. Not gold, not pardons, something so strange that historians would need 278 years and a discovery at the bottom of the sea to finally understand it. The blockade begins quietly. A merchant ship called the Crowley clears Charleston Bar, bound for London, and sails straight into a wall of guns. Within days, 8 more vessels are taken the same way. Nothing enters, nothing leaves. The pirates don't even bother hiding. They anchor in plain sight of the town and wait for the harbor to feed them. But the ships were never the real prize. Aboard the Crowley, the pirates find something better. Samuel Wragg, a member of the colony's governing council, traveling with his 4-year-old son, William. Suddenly, the most feared crew in the Atlantic isn't holding cargo. It's holding Charleston's leadership. And the message rowed ashore is brutal in its simplicity. Meet the captain's demand, or the hostages' heads will be delivered to the governor's door, and every captured ship will burn in sight of the town. Charleston has no navy, no warship within hundreds of miles. The city that survived wars with 2 empires can do nothing but read the ransom note. And the note is the strangest part of the whole story. Blackbeard, because by now you know exactly whose flag flies over this blockade, isn't demanding treasure. He's already taken plenty. The seized ships carried coin and cargo worth thousands of pounds. What he demands instead is a chest of medicine, worth perhaps 300 or 400 pounds, from a captain who could have named almost any price. It's the demand of a man who needs something desperately and doesn't want anyone to know why. The city pays, the chest is delivered, the hostages are released, stripped half naked, but alive, and the fleet melts back over the horizon. For 3 centuries, that medicine chest remained one of piracy's strangest riddles. The answer was lying 23 feet underwater the entire time. But to understand what happened at Charleston, you have to go back 6 months, to a night off Martinique when this ship carried a different flag, a different name, and a cargo far darker than gunpowder. November 28th, 1717. 100 miles off the island of Martinique, a French ship called La Concorde is limping toward the end of the worst voyage of her life. She left the port of Nantes months earlier, a slave ship owned by one of France's wealthiest slaving families, making her 3rd run of the Atlantic Triangle. On the coast of West Africa, her crew forced 516 human beings into her hold. The crossing has been a horror, even by the standards of a horrific trade. 16 of her crew are dead. 36 more are too sick to stand. Scurvy, dysentery, fever moving through the ship deck by deck. Below, in the dark, the people she carries have endured far worse. La Concorde is a large, fast, powerful vessel, but right now, she can barely defend herself. And that is exactly when 2 small pirate sloops appear on the horizon. They shouldn't stand a chance against a ship this size. 120 pirates, against a 300-ton frigate. But the pirates fire 2 shots, and the exhausted French crew surrenders one of the most valuable ships in the Atlantic, almost without a fight. Among the boarders is a tall officer the trade will soon learn to fear, Edward Teach. He walks the deck of the prize and understands immediately what he's looking at. Not cargo, not ransom, a weapon, a hull built for speed, big enough to carry serious guns, imposing enough to end battles before they begin. Most pirates would strip a ship like this and burn her. Teach decides to keep her. The French crew is put ashore on a nearby island and handed one of the pirates' own small sloops to sail home. They rename it Mauvaise Rencontre, bad encounter. The French, at least, kept their sense of humor, but there is nothing funny about what the pirates found in the hold. And what happened to the people imprisoned there is a part of this story history almost erased. Because for the men now in command, the ship's future mattered more than her cargo's freedom. Some were taken ashore, some were kept aboard, put to forced labor. Their names were never written down. The ship, though, the ship was about to be reborn. The pirates sail their prize to a quiet bay in the Grenadines, careen her on the beach, and begin turning a slave ship into a monster. Gun ports are cut into her decks. Cannons stripped from other captured vessels are hauled aboard, one by one, until a ship built to carry 14 guns bristles with 40. 40 guns. To put that in perspective, the Royal Navy warships hunting pirates in these waters at the time typically carried 20 or 30. In one refit, on one beach, the pirates have built themselves something the American colonies have no answer to: the most heavily armed ship between Boston and Barbados. Then Teach gives her a new name, and the name is a threat in itself: Queen Anne's Revenge. Queen Anne's wars had put thousands of sailors like him out of work when the fighting stopped. The name tells every English captain exactly who is coming back to collect, and it tells the crown this isn't just robbery, it's a grudge. But here is what makes this ship different from every other pirate vessel of her age. Teach, the man the world is about to call Blackbeard, understands something his rivals don't. A battle you have to fight is a battle you've already half lost. Battles cost crew. Crew costs everything. So the 40 guns aren't really there to be fired. They're there to be seen. And it works with terrifying efficiency. Captain after captain sees that black hull rise over the horizon, counts the gun ports, watches the flag climb the mast, and strikes his colors without a single shot. In her entire 8-month reign, the Queen Anne's Revenge almost never has to fight a real battle. Her silhouette does the fighting for her. By the spring of 1718, she leads a fleet of 4 vessels and hundreds of men, a pirate navy, with a flagship more powerful than anything sent to stop it, which raises the question Charleston was about to answer. What do you do with a weapon nothing can challenge? You point it at a city. For 6 months, the Queen Anne's Revenge owns the Western Atlantic. She takes ships off St. Vincent, Cuba, Hispaniola, the Bay of Honduras, the fleet swelling around her like a court around a throne. At her peak, she sails with 3 consorts and as many as 400 men under her flag. Colonial governors write increasingly desperate letters to London. Merchant insurance rates climb. Some captains simply refuse routes where the Black Frigate has been sighted. Think about what that means. One stolen slave ship, 8 months out of the yards of Nantes, has done what no enemy navy managed in a decade of war. She has made the English colonies afraid of the sea itself. 300 years before Hollywood dressed her ghost in a curse and called her the Black Pearl, the original was doing it for real. Then comes Charleston. The blockade you watched at the start of this story is the Queen Anne's Revenge at the absolute height of her power. A city held hostage, a government humiliated, a ransom paid in full, and not one shot fired in anger. It's the greatest act of pure intimidation in the history of piracy. And then, 2 weeks later, the most feared ship in the Americas is gone. No battle, no storm worth the name, no navy claiming a triumphant capture. The colonial record simply goes quiet. Ships that feared to sail begin sailing again. The panic evaporates, and nobody in Charleston or London or Nassau can say exactly why. A 40-gun ship with a 400-man fleet doesn't just disappear, but she did. In June 1718, off the coast of North Carolina, the Queen Anne's Revenge vanished from the ocean, and it would take 278 years to find out where she went. The answer isn't a battle. It isn't even bad luck. What actually happened in Beaufort Inlet that June morning may be the coldest double cross the golden age of piracy ever produced, and the man who ordered it was her own captain. Early June 1718. The pirate fleet noses into Beaufort Inlet, North Carolina, officially to careen the ships and scrape their hulls. And then, in calm water, in broad daylight, in a channel local sailors navigate every week, the Queen Anne's Revenge runs hard aground on a sandbar. An accident. That's what it looks like. Blackbeard even orders one of his sloops, the Adventure, to row out anchors and haul the flagship free. And somehow that ship grounds too. 2 vessels wrecked in one morning in some of the tamest water on the coast. Terrible luck. Except almost nobody who has studied what happened next believes in that luck. Because watch what Blackbeard does with his disaster. He doesn't salvage his 40 guns, the most valuable arsenal in the colonies. He doesn't rally his 400 men to save the fleet. Instead, he moves fast and quiet. The treasure, the best provisions, and a small hand-picked crew are transferred to the one sloop still floating. Around 25 men, the ones not chosen, are put ashore on a low sandbank. If you were one of them, you stood on wet sand with no food, no water, no boat, watching the loot you bled for sail away without you. One of Blackbeard's own officers would later testify the grounding was done deliberately. Follow the arithmetic and the accident becomes a business decision. 400 men splitting the plunder, or 40. A famous flagship every navy in the Atlantic is hunting, or one small, fast, anonymous sloop. Blackbeard had built the most feared ship in American waters, and the moment her fame outweighed her usefulness, he wrecked her on purpose and downsized his own company at gunpoint. To this day, a few historians still argue it really was an accident. The men on that sandbar would have told you otherwise. They were rescued days later, half dead, by another pirate, and their testimony helped nail the story into the record. The ship they left behind settled slowly into the sand, her gun ports filling, her name already dissolving into legend. And there she waited, 23 feet down, for 278 years, while the world forgot she had ever been real at all.
We'll drop the sensor here at 50
November 21st, 1996. A private research team is combing the seabed off Beaufort Inlet, hunting for a different shipwreck entirely. A Spanish vessel lost decades after our story. A mile off Fort Macon, in just 23 feet of water, their instruments snag on something. Divers go down expecting sand. They surface having found cannons. A whole cluster of them, fused into the seabed, with an anchor and the unmistakable mound of a large 18th century ship. But here's the problem. There's no name on a shipwreck. Sand strips paint in years. 3 centuries erase almost everything. To prove which ship this was, the evidence would have to speak for itself. And piece by piece, it did, like a courtroom case, assembling underwater. Exhibit 1. The guns. More than 30 cannons recovered, far too many for a merchant ship this size, and mismatched, cast in different countries, different calibers. That's not a navy's arsenal. That's an arsenal assembled from stolen ships, the armament fingerprint of a pirate. Exhibit 2. The ship's bell, cast years before Blackbeard ever saw her. A ship with a life before her fame, exactly like La Concorde. Exhibit 3. Wine bottles of a shape made only around 1710. And Exhibit 4. The quiet masterpiece, the stern post, hauled up with planks still attached and carved into its wood, depth markings in French feet. An English named wreck, built on French measurements. There is exactly one famous ship in these waters that fits. Then the excavation opened the hold and paid off a debt this story has owed you since minute 2. Among more than 400,000 artifacts, enough to fill a museum from a single ship, conservators catalogued a surgeon's kit, syringes, surgical instruments, a mortar and pestle for compounding drugs, equipment for treating, among other things, the diseases that tore through 18th century crews. The Charleston ransom answered, after 278 years, Blackbeard held a city hostage for a medicine chest because his own floating empire was quietly rotting from the inside. Hundreds of men, riddled with sickness that no plunder could cure, and the sand gave back one thing more: gold dust. Venetian glass trading beads, the currency of the ship's first life, the cargo of La Concorde, surfacing beside the pirate guns, as if the wreck refused to let anyone forget what she had been before the legend. So, was the Black Pearl real? Here is the honest answer. There was never a cursed ship crewed by the undead, but there was a black-hulled frigate that appeared out of legend and made an entire coastline believe the stories. A ship so feared that cities surrendered to her shadow, that captains gave up their cargoes at the sight of her name. Hollywood didn't invent the Black Pearl, it borrowed her. And the strangest part is that the borrowed version needed a supernatural curse to be as frightening as the real one was, with nothing but 40 guns and a reputation. Today, the real ship exists in 2 places at once. Nearly half of her still lies buried in the sand off Beaufort Inlet, meaning some of her secrets are, right now, still underwater. The rest sits in a conservation lab in North Carolina, where scientists rinse 3 centuries of ocean out of her bones so slowly that a single cannon can take 10 years to save. And in that lab, under white light, stands the stern post, the ship's spine, with the French numbers still carved clean into the wood. Marks made by shipwrights in Nantes, who could never have imagined what their vessel would become. A slave ship, a pirate flagship, a city's nightmare, a betrayed wreck, and finally, the most famous silhouette in the world, wearing a name Hollywood gave her. The sea doesn't keep secrets forever. It just waits for someone to come asking. If you want to know about the warship that was built to hunt ships exactly like her, the one that ended the entire Golden Age, that story is already on your screen.